one, which is what areas of policy, if any, need to be updated. And our questions, just to remind you, are sort of looking at the stakeholder feedback and what are the top policy issues raised by the stakeholders. What policy areas do we want to highlight? And then, with our summary questions, insights and questions that we want to dig further into. Kara's been doing a really good job of sort of, as you all talk, putting them in sort of the right categories. But if you want to make sure, we don't have to follow this, directly. So if there's something you really want to highlight or you want it in a certain area, make sure you let us know. But so Erin Scooble remains our timekeeper. We have an hour. So on this question, we have 30 minutes. Should we take 5 to 7 minutes to read again?
Yeah, we probably need 7 minutes on this one, or even.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was just going to tell people, so this one is supposed to be about current policy that needs updating, and the next one is about new policy. So sometimes it sounds a little bit strange, the
Yes.
feedback, but just keep that in mind.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Okay, so let's definitely we'll do a check at 7 and see if anybody, if we need more time after that. So Erin, are you there? And can you tell us at 7? Thanks.
Right.
All right, let's go. Oh, and it starts on page 24, if you needed to know that.
All right, we're reaching the end of our 7 minutes.
How's everybody feeling? Are you ready to go forward? I'm looking at, okay, I see Kevin is saying yes. Okay. All right, some thoughts. We're talking about updating policy, so as opposed to new policy. What thoughts do people have? What did the stakeholders seem to find important?
Well, one that we have been talking about, but I think we should really consider how we implement this, is apply the lens of racial justice to every policy and action undertaken by the Commission. Diversity, equity, and inclusion should reach the forefront of any work done by the Commission.
Mm-hmm.
I think the practice of developing a lens that we can use in that regard for looking at all of our work seems to be maybe an important first step in developing our, not just our plan, but what we engage in.
Right, because that was mentioned in the area you're talking about, as well as educator prep. It's throughout this whole question.
Right, so it shows up in a number of areas. It also shows up under performance assessment. It shows up in testing, educator prep, recruitment, for sure.
think another one that interests me is establish a clear goal of diversifying the profession. Consider the commission's role in enabling or constraining progress in this area. I think it's another lens that we could apply to all of our work.
Tina, could you please finish that? The clear goal to diversify the profession, and what was the last part, please? I apologize.
That was consider the commission's role in enabling or constraining progress in this area.
Mhm.
That was the stakeholder feedback.
One of the interesting things that I saw was a focus on educator mental health and well-being. Saw that a couple times.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Mhm. And I wonder if what's meant there is in educator prep, in particular. I mean, I'm trying to figure out where the nexus with our responsibilities or our areas of responsibility need to be. But yeah.
It did, yeah, it was
I
under
know that-
educator prep.
I know in
Yes.
the PPS one that when we just revised, we had a lot of talk about that, just about maybe it's not so much a subject or whatever, but just somewhere just telling your candidates, you know what, you have to practice self-care if you give, self-care. And so, just kind of like telling them it's just as important to take care of yourself as it is your students. And that
Right.
a lot of times that is not, everyone's so quick, we gotta get to the content. Just like our teachers are at the high school keep reevaluating what is the essential standards versus, we got to get through this half of the book. Well,
Right.
is the whole half of the book essential? So I think I remember we talked about it was like how important it would be to hear from your professor or your instructor or your mentor, hey, don't forget to take care of yourself because you're going to burn out if you don't.
Right. There's certainly a personal aspect to that, but there's also the practical of retention. I mean, burn people out, then it adds to that attrition in the field.
I think that it came under preparation is a key, because if you're starting with that right off as an emphasis, then that'll hopefully hold over into entering into the profession and then retention. And I like, even though they had it under educator preparation, they said, self-care for all educators. So, hopefully that is like the beginning and then moving on.
Yeah, I think that might be another lens by which we look at our work. Something you said, Kirsten, too, about essential standards. So high school teachers may be able to decide, well, what are the essential standards that we need to do here, for the well-being of all of us. I think we're at that point in the commission with the commission work as well. Again, we have developed very rigorous standards, and we've implemented them for a while now. And we also know that they are hard to do in one-year programs, and our one-year programs are not going away anytime soon. So I think that's part of educator well-being, is this essential standards piece. Are we really putting our money where our mouth is if we're saying we care about teachers' well-being?
One of the thoughts that intrigued me, it's a different topic, but one of the things that intrigued me over and over a couple of times throughout this whole document is the differentiation that some institutions are asking for based on either size or for accreditation purposes. And it has me thinking, I'm not sure what we do, but it's interesting. So I hadn't thought of it that way before. But it sounds like smaller institutions are really seeming to feel the burden more.
Well,
You get a sense of whether that's true now in the COVID era versus the rest of the time?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Mm.
Well, I think, I, I also think it, I don't know if it applies here, but I was just thinking of some of our new teachers this year who they started off in distance teaching, and how the mentorship, um, even our coaches in our district are scrambling to figure out how to best help them because, this is the new, I mean, the current teachers have been taught this way. So that goes back and again to the mental health and then the preparation and moving forward. I mean, we're in a different, everything we've always done the way we've done it is pretty much a lot of it's got to get revised sooner than later, because we don't know how long we're going to be like this, and or if we go, if more schools start offering more hybrid or I mean, I just think that, yeah, this is such unprecedented times and it's time to really think outside the box. And I think listen to all people in the field, from those just starting to those in the middle to those finishing to those who are trying to find a way to retire because this is just too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think there's such a vast depth out there that it'd be just really interesting to get all perspectives on a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
Another one that came up, and there was just one sentence here, and maybe there'll be more in the next one, but I think it's critical. And whoever wrote this wrote it quite eloquently. Strengthen the connection between undergraduate and professional preparation. Reconsider the value of, quote, subject matter first, unquote, policy and structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I also see that as, and we've talked about that here, it's time for us to really dig into what does it mean to be competent in your subject matter? What do new teachers really need in that regard? And how is it integrated? How is it satisfied? All of that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I remember when I went through my program, I had a few colleagues that couldn't get through the tests, but they were amazing in their lessons because we would have to model for each other and film. And then I had a few others that great people, but they could pass any test you gave them. But I have wished someone would have advised them, hey, I don't know that elementary or high school's for you. You might want to think about, just because it was a struggle for the things that are important in the day to day. And then the others, it took them a while to become teachers because of not being able to pass a test. But they were just so dynamic, and the engagement with their students, and they had the knowledge, they just couldn't pass a test.
Well, and this one spoke to me as well because, a couple of years ago, we had that focus on trying to push for more undergraduate preparation programs. And, maybe there's some research opportunities there to see how those programs have, played out. So. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the other pieces of feedback that caught my eye was, and I saw it a couple times, was related to public information campaigns, almost like public relations campaigns related to the teaching profession. And I know, as we, as commission staff attend conferences with our partners in other states, we hear that a lot. There's a lot of conversation around teaching profession and the bad name that it gets, and how do we combat that, and does teaching have a public relations issue, and whose role is it to change that perception of teaching. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that showed up a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Most definitely. I mean, I just popped in my head how, I'm going back to the PPS credential, how when that very first meeting, some of the ones who were there the first time said, it used to be so adversarial between the counselors, the psychologists, and social workers, because everybody felt like they had to protect their whatever. And now the three groups are now working together and putting on workshops and things. And so then I started thinking, just popped in my head, well, yeah, why can't the CTC do promotions with like other educational organizations, CTA, what's the other one in California? Any education group out there. I mean, how powerful would that be? Instead of, and maybe start working against that, because, sometimes we have that, the CTC, or, it's like, well, wait a minute, CTC is more than just what the blurb that you heard or the thing that you read, which is something that I've learned after being on the commission so much. Because I would hear from fellow colleagues, oh, well, CTC, and I'm like, well, it's not quite like that. But I would have known.
Right. Exactly. And I've seen this throughout. I mean, it was on other questions too, but there's great concern. We all have concern about educators that want to be special educators, and there's a shortage and people don't want to, we're having a hard time filling those positions. And I think that's an area. It reminded me when you were talking, Kirsten, about working together, because I know when you're not a special educator, you're just going to be, in the classroom. There's not much emphasis on that, and yet it has evolved where everyone should be working together. You should be working in partnership with special educators, but there's still this attitude like they're going to, take all of that on, and the other educators are just kind of, minor players in that, and that's not the case anymore. So,
Right.
Mhm.
Another one that intrigued me was the stakeholder engagement one on page 27, where it talked about how for any of our advisory panels or things like that, that we should have equal representation from higher ed and K-12 segments. I think that's a really interesting one, because I think that's always sort of our goal, but we know that it's very hard to get practitioners to serve based, they have to take time out of the classroom and that kind of thing. So I think we need to think more creatively about how to get those voices, and maybe, just spend a lot more time working with the organizations to figure out how to get more representation on those panels.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another one, and we have an agenda item on this as well, but is strengthening our standards around parent and family engagement.
right.
And that's, I think, already been on our radar. And one thing I found interesting, I did an analysis once between our general ed TPEs and our special ed TPEs, and highlighted anywhere it talked about families. And a big difference I found across the two was that in the special ed TPEs, there's a lot of two-way communication required there. And in the general ed, it was very one-way. Teacher communicates to the families.
Right.
Right. And that came up in preparation for our meeting over the next 2 days. Like my office, along with other members of other divisions. So we have someone that comes to our meetings for preparation from the special ed division. And he mentioned that, there's a whole group, family empowerment centers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was talking about how family engagement is a huge part of the special education arena and everything. And it does speak to what you just said, Tina. And also what I said earlier is that general ed educators they don't really think about that family engagement piece as much, or they feel like they're just, minor players in that. And yet, when it comes time to have those meetings with family and with students and to talk about the progress of the students, we're very much needed at those meetings and should be at those meetings. So yeah, strengthening that,
Well,
that
and then
connection.
we should we should catch now the teachers, the student teachers. Everybody has in many ways been so much more engaged with families during the virtual school opportunities. I know I've been hearing, I know our own student teachers at my institution across the board, they are having opportunities to get engaged with families like they never did before. And so I think we could get some insights from all of them.
Right. I think it's very timely, and it will, I think it's a great opportunity to turn that corner on what it means around family engagement and parent engagement and everything because of the situation we've gone through.
Yeah.
So.
I know we have probably just a couple minutes on this one left. Is that right, Erin? All
Yep,
right.
we've got about 3.5 minutes left.
Okay, great. Any last thoughts before we move to the next item?
And just to give an example, just to kind of close that up, you know, I had a friend talk about, she stated, you know, we should look at parent conferences in a whole new way because of this situation. You know, it used to be maybe a school would devote a whole day, you know, one day out of the parent conference days, so that you would capture parents and guardians, you know, in the evening time and everyone would stay. But now this situation has taught, like, you could work that around their break time or their lunchtime and get on, like, you know, technology, so they don't have to take off from work or worry about that situation. So it just opened up, you know, probably some areas people weren't thinking about. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and more frequent ways to connect.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I was going to say that I'm just loving the fact that we're speaking about policy, but in policy, we're talking about communications, we're talking about parents, we're talking about racial justice, and the idea that an organization can think in terms of those really like core to human beings, that gets translated into our policy. And the idea that the part that stood out to me was what we started with, was around public information campaign and the teaching profession, and letting that be part of our sacred responsibility, is understanding the teaching profession and promoting the teaching profession. And that we're not, back to the question we did before lunch, was about, we're not just about compliance. It's not compliance. There's a racial justice part of it, a social justice part of it. And we talked about taking care of ourselves, and that teachers need to have a wellness, like, how do we have these values be represented in our policies? And it's not lost on me that this is a section around policy, and yet it's going to go to our values. And so I'm appreciating the feedback went into the bigger ideas that sort of define a quality organization, in my opinion.
Here,
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think with the self-care, yeah, for all programs, all credential programs that come through.
Great.
I'm going to turn my camera off for just a minute, considering self-care. My son is just about to leave after being home for a week. He's coming back up to East Bay to college, and I have to walk him to the door. So excuse me for a minute while I say goodbye to him.
All right. And I wanted to find out, we'll move to our next one, but do we want somebody to take over the, reporting out? Commissioner Jackson, you want to do that again, or does somebody else want to?
Yeah, and I misunderstood what they said at the beginning. I just covered question 5, so I apologize. And then all of a sudden they moved on and I didn't get to 6. So
It's just,
We weren't the only one.
yeah.
That was
okay.
good. I thought we were just doing question 5 too. So
I thought so too.
Okay, thank
And then
you.
I'm like, hello, get back to Terry, group 1, come on. I mean,
Okay,
Commissioner
thank
Jackson,
you.
sorry. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes. No, it's fine. I'm used to Terry.
So do you want to do it again, or should we share the wealth? It's up to you guys.
I'm fine unless, someone wants to, share the wealth. So.
Does that work for everybody?
I think that works great.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, and then we'll go to 7 now. So question
8, I
7.
think.
Oh,
Question
I'm
8.
sorry, 8. Thank you.
Okay.
Question 8, you're right. And that begins on page 30. And I guess let's do another 7 minutes. We have time for that? Yeah, we do. All right.
All right, we're coming to the end of our 7 minutes.
All righty. Thanks, Erin. Oh, this is great. All right. So this is new policy areas that should be taken up by the commission. What strikes you? Let's just jump right into it.
I'll start what I see as stuff that's glaring to me, which is, it just seems like it's all over the place, the DEI stuff. I think that's the thing that stands out, whether it's under education quality, educator quality, like teacher retention, recruiting more educators of colors, including linguistically. It's just everywhere, you know. Yeah, every section I see, it just sticks out in front of my face. And
Yeah.
I think one, yeah, that hit me.
Clearly a priority, you know, in many areas here. That jumps out at me too, no question.
And I think the stakeholders, many of them are providing real concrete ways of doing things that we can come back and look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple other things that I see in a couple places was create build an educator ethics code of conduct into program standards. That was mentioned a few times.
Mhm.
As well as a couple times again. This one I found interesting. There's two different ways they said address teacher well-being, but then it says study teacher well-being. Teacher mental health issues have increased in recent years. So,
Yeah, I saw that throughout as well. Really emphasize teacher well-being throughout.
and then again, it was how rethink how educators relate to and engage with students and families.
Right.
I'm trying to think back. It's been a while since I went through a program, but I don't ever remember that really being a discussion. How do you
No.
talk to
Your
parents?
programs?
And
No.
that's the biggest thing that I get as a counselor from they're just like, you know, I say, okay, well, the parent would like to, and then they want to tell me, and I'm like, no, they need to hear it from you, because I'm like the third party. I'm not in the classroom. I'm not
Right.
I'm not with their child, and then even some are like, well, will you be on what used to be in person? Will you meet with me with them? And I'm just like, the first few times that ever
Right.
happened, it was kind of like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that's part of being a teacher, meeting. And then I thought
Right.
about myself, my first time I had to meet with a parent as a teacher. And just kind of like, okay, well, what do I do? What do I say? What do I not say? What should I do? What should I not do? And some people inherently don't have an issue. And others, you know, some of the things that sometimes we say make things worse rather than better. We haven't role played that.
Right.
Right.
And sometimes parents can be intimidating, especially when you're the young person.
I was just going to say confidence
Yeah.
is really important in there, you know, to
Yes.
feel like you have a valid voice when you're just starting out. It's
Right.
darn intimidating. Mm-hmm.
That's it. I think that's an area you clearly grow into if it's not instinctive or natural. You know, you clearly grow into it, and yeah, and it definitely doesn't come up in preparation, and so yeah, at least it didn't when I went through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is making me think about something too. Things that you all have said too about, and there's a lot of information in this data is also saying, you know, support them once they're, you know, in service, and, you know, all of this. And I wish we had a true continuum of growth in practice. A little bit more than we do now, where we know we start out in pre-service, but we know you're going to continue to grow in these areas, and I don't know exactly what that looks like, but we know we can't do everything in pre-service, and we do have a 2-tier credential system, and we have done things in that regard, pre-service and in-service, but it might be time to sort of relook at the system again and see if there's something we want, if there's a way of doing things better.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thought, and with the California standards for the teaching profession coming up, Kara, yeah, that may open up the door to talk about these kinds of things. Absolutely.
And, you know, there's standards, but there's processes too. We've especially, again, you know, if, you know, the gift of COVID, if there is one, is really thinking about, you know, the pre-service to in-service process, and can we reimagine what that could be?
That's a great idea, since, you know, at this point we're still stumbling or trying to push the idea of the IDP. So what else could we do to connect those two worlds? That's a good idea.
As Linda Darling Hammond, our former chair, said, how build back better. Maybe something we can.
The things I think about is how our preliminary credential is a 5-year document. And, you know, when a new educator has 5 years to complete their induction program, if they're able to get a job and complete it right away, and then they move to the clear, that's the last moment in which they are having required support, you know, and then they're a new teacher with 2 years under their belt. And, you know, they have requirements that they might need to meet for the local level, but there's no longer any professional development requirements for the state for the clear credential. So, you know, are they having a disservice because they go through induction right away, and then they're left out there to you know, have no support potentially, depending on where they're working. And I don't know how we, you know, might look at that as a way to, I don't know, I'm not sure where I'm going with that one, but just a thought that I had, you know.
It's brainstorming, Erin. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Well, when it used to be a requirement, because I'm from that era where I remember putting everything in the box and then 5 years making my list or whatever. But at that point, it forced districts to get you professional development, because, you know, and then it changed to where districts were taking on all the professional development, but, you know, it scatters up and down the state. So depending upon where you are, even still today, having to have that requirement afterwards, it was a bit tedious. So I know we can update that with technology, but it did force, at that point, my district especially, a small rural one, and a superintendent who didn't believe in all that, to have us get to go to professional development to keep current. So in some ways it was a help, because it's like, I'm not going to be able to keep my credential or get my clear credential if I don't get a number of these hours done. So not that we have to go back that hardcore, but there might be a happy medium in there somewhere.
Yeah, because you don't want it to just be check a box, you know,
Exactly.
oh, I have to do this.
Exactly.
It has to be meaningful,
Exactly. Meaningful, yes.
you know, is having no requirement at the state level the right thing?
Right. And I think it really depends on, like, the district, but you get down to the school site. So if the school site is moving together as a unit about their vision and what they want for their students at that site, then you see that as the best environment for someone who just goes through the 2 years of induction and they're done. But yet they've been in this environment where the school is really trying to zero in and focus on what they want to do for students there. And then they can get caught up in that and the professional learning and everything like that. And it almost like continues to go on then at that point. But that's given, like, you know, we know that's all over the map. And the best case scenario is that they're a part of something that's going on with everyone. They're not just considered new educators that can't really be a part of something bigger.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was trying to find out, I don't know what question it was in, but I remember seeing it a couple times that there was in there about requiring school psychologists to have 150 hours of additional, so that they can keep up with current practices. So that right there makes me think that maybe there's an issue out there for them, that they're asking for it to be required so they can get the updated whatever's out there. So it just popped into my head. That showed up a couple times.
I saw that too, and this conversation is making me think about what is our role in promoting and developing a teacher career ladder, which I think is sorely needed in our profession in different ways. And a lot of districts do remarkable things in having teachers grow into different roles and opportunities, and et cetera. And it used to be that there was one path to advancement. It was you become an administrator.
Right.
And you step out of a classroom to do that. And so now there are some different roles, but there are many countries that really have that formalized. You get this extra education and now you're an expert here. Or in order to be a mentor teacher, you have developed, expertise and skills, and now you're at this place in your career. And there's these opportunities for you in teacher prep. So I don't know what our role is in that, but I think that's part of thinking about this, and also the burden of growing in your practice. We're seeing throughout this that we don't want new teachers and in-service teachers to carry all the burden of what they need to ensure that they're doing.
Right.
Programs and employers need it too. And I don't know, I think it's an exciting time to get all of that if we can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a parallel track has to be going on, the evolution needs to be going on at the school sites and the districts so that they're ready, like you said, for new educators to come in. And it's like, yes, you're a new educator, you're starting off, but yet you're bringing in, it's almost like truly respect and recognize that they're coming in probably with a culturally responsive lens, that they're coming in with, more strategies about family and parent engagement. It's like recognizing that, and it means that the field that's already there needs to come up also and be ready to receive, so that new educators can jump right in and not feel like, well, I'm new, I have to sit back and kind of let everyone else carry the ball. They can just jump right in because they have that background, so it's a different way to look at it instead of what we typically do. Oh, you're new, kind of, sit back and watch. So
I keep looking at Cindy because this just seems like a place that she would have so much experience and input to help us on this.
I'm just so happy. It resonates so much to just our core beliefs and what we believe in, and to think that we can, like I said before, that we can put this into policy and that we can lead. I think it's leading not just our state, it's leading the country, because California does set the bar. And for us to be able to think about what that could look like, it's inspiring to me, but inspiring only works when it turns to action. But this is a team that can make the action and tie it to the values that we so believe in.
And linked to that throughout this work too, we're seeing consider community colleges more in what it is that we're doing. That's another.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many teachers that are in the profession that we can build local ladders, and we can build the local networks, and those matter. The local ones really do matter. But if I've learned anything from Linda Darling-Hammond, it's that you just mentioned her Build Back Better. What I learned and love most about her work is that she always, the policies that she writes and policies that she's involved in begin with finding people in the field that are actually making things happen in ways that she looks for the positive deviants. Those are deviant behavior that results in positive results, and uses appreciative inquiry. And where are you seeing something that's working? Take that and write the policy so that everyone else does what somebody happened to figure out on their own to do. And so this idea, like this teacher ladder, what does the ladder look like, and how do we create policy that replicates? I mean, you said that you think some districts are doing some great things in this area. You have more experience probably at the state level of what other districts are doing, and whether they're beginning stages or advanced stages. Let's figure out what that is and find those points of light lift them to a policy level so then it gets scaled and replicated statewide. And that's where good policy comes from. Is it's not just top down. Top down just kills innovation, but innovation on its own doesn't promise equity and excellence across an entire state, especially as large as ours. So how do we do that bottom up, top down, same, and pick that, if this is a key strategy policy thing that we think is important for teachers and this career ladder, what do we build and build it back better, and have in mind, where do we have some ideas of people that have stepped into this in sort of in spite of the state, in spite of the CTC, people have done something that is innovative. Now, if we do it, then it's because of the state and because of the CTC, we've become a better state. We have more diverse teaching workforce. We have a career ladder. We have people that enter into the profession knowing that they have a long, fruitful career in front of them that's about social justice and equity, and they go in like full hearts to do something, but now there's like, they see a path for themselves that's beyond just their first few years, and they feel valued and cared for because self-care is a part of it. I mean, this is policy stuff, that policy with heart is always going to be the best policy.
Yeah, that's great.
And what I'm becoming aware of in, you know, in my position at the department is that county offices are really, they really have a role to play, because, you know, things are passed at the legislative level, and then through the department, you know, resources are going out to county offices and everything. And there's a lot of county offices that are really involved in equity work already, you know, and they're like, I feel like they're that middle ground in terms of districts, LEAs and everything, and what the state has to offer. They're like that great middle ground to be able to, you know, fertilize these great ideas and to really uplift good practices that are going on out there in the various LEAs and everything, because they have that connection. So, yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left. We want to make sure we capture as much as we can from all of you. It's been an amazing conversation, I have to say.
I know. I love this conversation.
One of the things that popped into my mind as you all were just talking is, you know, we have a public presentation option at the end of every commission meeting, and we kind of just allow public presentation as they request it. But have we ever considered maybe reaching out to some of those practitioners who are doing these amazing things and asking them to come and present, especially now that we're doing it over Zoom and we can really have someone from anywhere throughout the state do it, and make that a priority to have some time set aside at every commission meeting where we get the opportunity to hear from those practitioners who are doing great things and pushing the envelope and making good changes.
That's a really good idea, Erin. And I was looking at some recent books that individuals put out, and I'm thinking, wow, these are fantastic ideas. And so even researchers, you know, that have been doing really interesting things.
And I like the idea. I hadn't thought of that. We, you know, Mary and I had talked about our information sessions as we've done in the past, but something more informal, just invite people in via Zoom to share their practice of some sort that, you know, we're interested in knowing more about. Very cool.
I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So Kara and Sasha, you guys have been doing a really great job of capturing this discussion. Do we have any questions we need to add? It looks like we do have a couple of questions here. So anything else to add here?
I'm going to add one thing throughout all of the, so one thing that's been interesting to me about the stakeholder feedback is people wanting, you know, saying the commission needs a role in advocating for the profession and recruitment more to diversify the profession. But the other one, I mean, the number one thing I see new teachers needing in order to be able to commit to becoming teachers in a high quality intensive teacher preparation program is funding. If they just had the funds to go, they would do it.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to start advocating more, and if we're going to use our position to help advance the field, I really think we have to help advance in some way, advocate for how important it is to do
Totally
that.
agree. And then since there are other professions out there that do that, we can, say for example,
Yeah.
there's several that do apprenticeships, internships, residencies. It's not like it can't be done, because it is being done. So why aren't we? When education is what's going to get people to some of these other programs.
I think particularly, the commission has information on shortage areas, especially, and we're not just talking teaching. We have a dearth of school nurse programs. There's a lot we can do in this area, I think, that we haven't done so far.
So I used to tell my colleagues at UC Santa Barbara that I thought that, all the research dollars that came into all of their departments, a percentage should go to education, because if it wasn't for us and teachers, they wouldn't have their students there in the first place.
And they wouldn't be a teacher.
That's right.
All right. Looks like they're going to make us go into the large group here in a minute. Any other last thoughts? I just had one kind of offbeat thought. Somebody mentioned here about multiple subjects and making sure all of the subject areas were covered, which we do, but they mentioned science in particular. And given the last year and the lack of understanding or trust of science, it really has, for me, underscored the need for science education in the United States. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what to do about it, but
let's add that to the subject matter preparation.
Well, and for so long, the emphasis was reading and math. And so we'd get students coming into high school that didn't have any science, or maybe they did a week of science because it was all about math and reading. So they didn't come in with any science. And then were challenged their freshman year.
Well, I also did one year when I was a program director at UCSB. I went back 5 years and just looked at the undergraduate majors of all of our multiple subjects candidates. And there was like almost none, maybe 2 who came from a math and science major.
All right, everybody, thank you.
Thank you.